It's the weekend and you have financial questions that need answering. That can only mean one thing. It's time for Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome to February. I know it was February last weekend, but we were so up in the whole Super Bowl thing. Mark, did you like the game? I thought it was, I know it wasn't the greatest football, but boy, it was exciting and it was close. And I loved that halftime show. It sort of made me feel bad about myself. I'm sure that I, like most people in the middle of the whole thing, said, wait, how old is J-Lo again? She's 50. Oh, brother. Better get my butt on that Peloton a lot longer. I know. Well, I don't think I could be a great pole dancer. I think I'm too tall to be a good pole dancer. You are listening to the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life, and I am your host, Jill Schlesinger, and Mark is managing the process behind the glass window. We are broadcasting live from the Capital One studios here in New York. Capital One, what's in your wallet? And there's a lot going on, a lot of movement in the markets. If the whole idea of the coronavirus creeping into growth and eating up profits, that seemed to go by the wayside the longer, at least at the beginning of the week. And I don't know, just as always, gang, stick to your game plan. Don't make a lot of changes because of the news. That's just about the worst reason to do it, really. And if you do that, you'll probably stay out of trouble, which is always good. We want you to stay out of harm's way. There's also some big news this week breaking in Jill on Money land. Do you want to know what that is? It is that the paperback edition of The Dumb Things Smart People Do With Their Money, my book, is out. And if you go onto the website, jillonmoney.com, and you click on the link that says the book, there you can buy it from whatever book vendor you want to buy it from. Or maybe go into your local bookstore and say, hey, where's the dumb things smart people do with their money? And, it's fun. It's in a nice little neat, cute little paperback edition. It's compact. Slip it into your bag, your bicycle bag, your knapsack, whatever. Love for you to enjoy that book with you and your family. So buy it. The Dumb Things Smart People Do With Their Money, 13 Ways to Right Your Financial Wrongs. Paperback edition is available. All right. Let's start this program with a caller. Remember, if you'd like to get on the air with us, all you have to do is email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Or maybe when you're on the website, after you've purchased 25 copies of my book, then you click on the contact button. It's in the upper right-hand corner. We will start this hour with Michael from Salt Lake City. Hello, Michael. Welcome to the program. What can we do for you?
Thank you, Jill. I was wondering about getting some advice on distributions from a 401k when you have pension.
Okay. Tell me about yourselves or yourself.
Okay. Married. I just retired. My wife is a registered nurse who is working part-time still. I'm retired from both active duty military and federal civil service. So I have two pensions combined totaling $100,000 a year.
Wow. That's great.
I still have to wake up for it, though.
How old are you, Michael?
I will be 63 this year, and my wife will be 61 this year.
Okay. And how much money does she earn part-time as a nurse?
Well, she just went to part-time. So right now, I would say she is earning around $60,000 a year before taxes. Okay.
And is she putting money into her retirement plan to reduce the tax liability, or is she just taking the money?
She's taking the money. She used to, she does have a 401k, but when she went part-time, they terminated their matching. So
okay.
She's just taking the money.
All right. And so you've got the pensions, $100,000. She's got $60,000. So you're solidly in the 22% tax bracket, which is kind of nice. Like, you're not poking up into too much more than that. And tell me about the retirement monies that you guys have. You said you have a 401k, or did she have a 403b?
No, she has a 401k also.
Okay.
Combined, we have about $1.8 million.
Okay, that's fantastic. Great. You guys are awesome. So that's amazing. What is it that is your question in terms of the investments or pulling money out of that portfolio?
Pulling money out of the portfolio. Basically, we have 4 kids, all of whom we paid for college. They're all doing really well. Our goal is to spend all the money we've worked really hard for. We can pretty much spend whatever we can take.
Mm-hmm.
And we live fairly frugally to make sure that they had college educations and that we had sufficient finances for retirement. And now we want to spend it, but I don't want to, go into the poorhouse, hopefully when we're in the 80s, but I want to take out money now, particularly while we're in the go-go years of retirement where we are healthy and able to travel and enjoy life.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds kind of fantastic. Do you have money outside of retirement right now, or like just a little savings or any investment accounts as well?
No.
Okay, so
no,
it's
the
all
house
in here.
is paid off,
Mm-hmm.
so we don't have a mortgage and we don't have any other bills.
Okay. So I have a couple of ideas around this. Obviously, when what you're going to want to do is delay taking Social Security because you want to wait till you're 70. You have plenty of income. I imagine that the 160 is sufficient. You described yourself as, living within your means. So 160 is plenty of money for you to pay your basic bills, right?
Yes.
Okay. How much in your mind would you want to take out of the account to have like your fun money?
Well, as far as fund money goes, probably wouldn't be an amount that we would spend every month, but I was thinking around $5,000 or $6,000 a month that we would spend some of and we would put into a savings account to fund nice travel vacations.
Great. Okay. This is what I would think. I think you're perfectly fine. What I would try to do is probably keep yourselves in the 24% tax bracket because that's the next level up. And I think what's a great idea is to take money out of these accounts. Make sure you don't pop up above that 24%. So if you're married filing jointly in 2020, the top end of the 24% bracket is $326,600. Know that if you want to take out $60,000, even $70,000, that you're going to have to really take out 100, right? Because you're going to have to take 100 gross. That's going to add 100 grand to your total taxable income, and then you got to pay the tax due. But I have no problem with you paying the tax due at a 24% rate. In fact, I think this is a great idea, and I think that if you want, you could kind of take as much as you possibly can right up to that level, because I think for your situation, getting that money out, paying the tax at the 24% rate is probably your best long-term bet that you can make. So I hope that helps, and thank you so much for calling. You did a fantastic job saving, Michael. All right, you're listening to Jill on Money. When we return, we're going to answer more of your financial questions. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. That's our email address.
.401ks, IRAs, refinancing, she covers it all. Back to Jill on Money with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are delighted that you are joining us. I was just thinking about the caller we just did, and I thought, wow, it's a lot of money they saved and got a pension. It's so amazing. But some of you have been giving us flack because you think that rich people don't have any financial questions. Guess what? Everyone has a financial question. Don't get all nutty. If you have a financial question and you want to ask it and you don't have $1.8 million saved in your retirement plan, that's okay. But don't complain about the people we put on the air if you're not going to ask us your own question. Come on, ask questions. I like rich people. I like poor people. I'm happy. Just the questions are the ones that drive us. Email us, askjill@jillonmoney.com. And you can always send us a note if you're poking around the website. That website address is jillonmoney.com. Isn't that easy? And you can read the stuff that I've written and listen to past shows. You can watch TV segments. There's also a great resource section that Mark keeps up. And if you've got any additions that you want to provide us, like, hey, I ran across this great calculator, something like that, send it to us. We'd love to add that. Okay? Now let's do some emails here. This is from Matt. He writes, my wife and I have lived in Connecticut for the last 5 years, and prior to that, we lived in Virginia. We're looking to move back down south. I'm working in my father's business. My wife is a nurse. We have a 2-year-old. Neither of us have any retirement. I'm 46. She's 42. In 2019, we made $90,000. I'm a disabled veteran and receive $2,200 every month tax-free. We have a mortgage. The rate is 3.375%, 2 car loans. My question, what steps do we need to take to make the smooth transition back to Virginia? How much of a mortgage should we take on in Virginia? We want to get out of Connecticut ASAP. We feel like all we were doing is paying taxes after taxes after taxes. We're just drowning a little bit in Connecticut. Okay, Matt, drowning in Connecticut. First of all, what we need to figure out is what it would cost you to buy a home that you'd be happy in Virginia. And then we kind of want to work backwards. We want to look at whether you have equity in your home right now in Connecticut, and then what you would be earning when you move back down to Virginia. So I think I need some more information, but it's quite possible, hopefully, that you've got some extra money that you've made because the housing market in Connecticut probably increased since you left. Once you give me more of that information, we can help you out. I think the real important part here is that if you could certainly spend less on a home in Virginia than you will be selling your Connecticut home for, gosh, that would be a good first step. Then we want to make sure that we factor in how much money you're going to be making and whether you guys can afford being in that home. And we want to also make sure that you start saving for retirement, because I'm worried that you're in your 40s and you haven't started yet. All right? We want to get you going there. So if you've got some more, send us some follow-up information. We'd really like to hear from you, and so we can walk you through the process with some more concrete steps. Okay. Bill said, I heard you talking about not collecting Social Security until you're 70 years of age, but you didn't give a reason. What is the reason? The reason is that if you can wait, it's wonderful because you get essentially an 8% increase for every year that you wait. It's not exactly that, but it's essentially that. And most people don't even have an opportunity to wait because they need the money and they can't afford it. But if you can afford it, and you've got some longevity, right? If you're not a well person, it doesn't make sense. But if you've got some longevity, if you wait until you're 70, you get an 8% increase for every year that you're waiting. And if you live until, Mark, what's the break even? I think it's 82 or 83-ish is about your break even. If you live beyond 82 or 83, you will have made a really smart decision. So, of course, tell me when you're going to die, and I'll tell you when to collect Social Security. I know, that's a little daft, as the British say. Okay, the next note is from Carla asking whether or not they need long-term care insurance. Carla writes, we retired 1.5 years ago from teaching careers. We are pulling $90,000 a year from a total of $1.1 million in IRAs. So that's one source of income, a brokerage account, and what she says, our defined contribution from our retirement system. So they have $1.1 million in assets, and they're pulling $90,000 a year. That's way, way, way too much money to pull from those accounts. So our first problem is forgetting about long-term care. You can't pull that much money from these accounts, unless I'm not understanding this. She goes on to say that they're going to get pensions of about $40,000 total. So I wonder if their game plan was to pull money out of the retirement accounts and the brokerage account of $1.1 million until they receive their pensions. I don't know, but let me just say, stop taking $90,000 a year out of your portfolio. What you don't tell me in all of this is, forgetting about the long-term care question, is how much money you really need to live on. I wonder if it's just the $90,000. Let's me make some assumptions. Let's say that once they received their pensions, they were then pulling more like $40,000 or $45,000 out of the money, out of the $1.1 million. That would be more reasonable. Still a little too much. I'd rather it be closer to $35,000, $40,000. They're going to plow through some money if they keep doing this. And then I guess they'll also get some Social Security eventually. So let's start with this. Number one, you're probably pulling too much money out of this, but I need a little more detail. Number two, whether or not you need long-term care really is dependent on kind of what is left in your assets by the time you've got the Social Security and the pensions. So maybe, ideally, what I'm hoping you're doing is you're pulling $90,000 a year out of your portfolio right now, and that when you get your pension and your Social Security, you will no longer be pulling that $90,000 out. In which case, it's not going to be $1.1 million, but maybe it'll be, I don't know, $700,000, $750,000, and then that will just sit. I'm hopeful that's the case. Now, if you then are going to have somewhere around $90,000 a year in income, and you're wondering about long-term care, it might be worth looking into getting some sort of policy that could cover a portion of what care might cost in your area. That would be at least worth consideration, because right now you're about to be spending down a lot of your money, Carla, before you start getting that other income. And so I think it's worth you at least looking into this. Not to say you must, but remember, long-term care insurance, it can be very expensive. Okay, next up, CJ says, if I have an account with a bank and a value of more than $250,000, should I move the amount greater than the $250,000 to another bank, even if the return is lower? This is about FDIC insurance, which is only covering an individual for $250,000. Ideally, yes, of course. But you got to be able to find some institution that'll give you as much money. Try one of the online banks. Go to depositaccounts.com, and then maybe you can find some action there. Also, $250,000 in the bank, a lot of money. Is there some better use of that money? All right, you're listening to Jill on Money. And during the break, what you ought to do, I'm going to do this like crazy this whole show. You should, of course, subscribe to our podcast, Jill on Money, but you should also buy my book, The Dumb Things Smart People Do With Their Money, 13 Ways to Right Your Financial Wrongs, out in paperback right now, ladies and gentlemen. Go get it. Okay, we'll be right back.
Back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger helps you take the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. Mark, it's funny. We were doing some recording recently, and we didn't have our music cued. And the music definitely puts me in a mindset. I might just have to play it. Send me the clip of it so I have it, and then maybe I'll be better. Did you notice that my intros and outros were worse when we had no music? Little flat, he said. So send me that. I'm gonna have to just play that Joel Goodman snippet. He's the guy who wrote our music for us. Okay. If you've got a financial question, give us a holler. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. That's Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. That's what Ed did. who says, I really enjoy the show. This is funny. On some of the somewhat repetitive types of questions, I enjoy seeing how close I can come to what you and Mark are thinking and going to say. Don't think you can get inside these heads. It's very scary inside these heads. You just don't want to go there. We're both crazy in different ways, thankfully. Okay, let's go back to you, Ed. You taught for 35 years. You're retired. And then, listen to this, and was immediately rehired to teach at 3/4 time. That's amazing. I'm now in my 44th year of teaching middle school and high school, mostly for the fun of teaching teenagers. God, they're great. Since I've been collecting Ohio teacher retirement, as well as my part-time salary now for 9 years, and we started saving and investing, we're financially secure. I keep advising people, save, which is great. Here's my query. Some of my younger colleagues are interested in going to a presentation on a supplemental teacher retirement plan called a 457. The pitch is that it's new, improved 403B. It's not new and improved. It's just a different part of the tax code. I'm thinking about going just to hear what it is about. What red flags should I listen for? If necessary, suggest this isn't the best thing for them. My first thought is that a Roth IRA could be better, lower cost, higher return option. I look forward to hearing what you have to say. So, Ed, again, a 457 is like a 403B. What you really want to look out for is what are the plan choices? What are the investment choices? Often in a 457 and a 403B, especially in school systems, you're getting annuities through big, huge insurance companies. So my general response is I'd love it for those people who have expensive, loaded up, larded up fees in those kinds of plans to also maybe use part of that, but also use a Roth. And if there's a Roth option and maybe there's a really great investment provider, sure. But what you're really looking at for red flags is not so much the type of plan, but the investment inside of that plan. Okay? So if there's any question, give me a holler back, okay? Because that's really important to us. All right, next up. Joe writes, my wife and I have accumulated money in our 401k. We eventually want to leave a sizable amount to each of our 3 daughters when we pass away. Very nice. We're both 66. Hopefully we've got a long way to go before this happens. My concern is that the elimination on the ability to stretch this inheritance over the course of their lives means the inheritance will end up being taxed at a huge percentage since it will have to be withdrawn over only 10 years and will have to be added to their current income when they withdraw it. I read in your recent column that you note that there are some exceptions to the elimination of stretch. The exceptions are I think the exceptions are about disability is what I believe, but I'll check into that. But here's the thing, Joe, about the stretch IRA. 10 years is a long time to pull money out. I don't know how much money you have inside of that account, but I wish that people would stop getting so freaked out about the money. Someone was going to have to pay the tax. You would have to pay the tax. The kids would have to pay the tax. Who cares? So I don't know. I really believe people are making themselves a bit too nutty about this one. Mark, can you see what the exceptions are? I think it is. I think it's disability is the exception that we get. All right. Kenneth just received an inheritance of $32,000. What do I do with it? I'm on disability, but I'm okay. I love your show. Hey, Kenneth, you know what? If you are okay, then and you're on disability, this is probably a good chunk of money. You would maybe think of paying down some debt, but most importantly, keep the money safe and secure. You never know when you might need it. I don't know what else you have in terms of investments, so I'd need to know more before I could give you better advice than that. Stephen wants to know, he's 64 years old, and he says, I've got 90 grand in a traditional IRA, 8 grand in an annuity, 25 in savings. Should I use the savings to switch to a Roth IRA or open one up for me and the missus? Okay. I don't know. I wouldn't want to burn up the money that you have in savings. So what I would do is this. If you're going to part-time and you are starting to maybe have the ability to really manage your tax liability, I'd build up a little bit of cash, more money in cash in your savings, and then you can use it to slowly convert the money from a conventional IRA to a Roth IRA. But don't burn up all that cash at once. Okay? Let's see. Jim. I've got 529 plans from New York for each of my 8 grandchildren. I've got a son who's a lawyer with law school loans. Can I open a 529 plan for him to use toward his law school loan? No, you can't. But there may be a chance to use some of the money for his kids to help him with that. And there's also a chance for him, under the new the Secure Act rules, to take some money from his retirement account and use that to pay off his loans. But I'd have to know a lot more about his situation before giving him that advice. But that is something to at least consider. All right? All right. Last one before we go to a break. Tim says, I've paid into a variable flexible life insurance policy for many years. I'm 67. My premiums are going up. My agent suggests going from the current $365,000 to $100,000 payout, which would keep premiums level. My idea, have my children contribute upon my death. They would get a nice benefit, death benefit with no tax. What do you think? I don't know if you need the insurance at all. Let's start there. If you don't need this insurance, maybe the best thing to do is to simply borrow the money out of the policy. I don't know. There may be better things to do. I need to know more about your financial life and the kids' financial lives. Okay? All right. You're listening to Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, we would love to hear from you. Just send us a note. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Or if you're on the website at jillonmoney.com, hit the contact button. We will get your message and respond as quickly as we can. All right, we will be right back.
Do I invest here? Should I put my money there? Jill Schlesinger can help you. Back to Jill on Money.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. Hey, Mark, what's your opinion on things like this? Like, look at this tag that's sitting inside of my sweater. I'm like the princess and the pea. It drives me insane. Why do manufacturers still do this with these tags that make you insane? Or make me insane. Now all I can do is touch it and want to get rid of it. Oh, my God. I can't. I take every single one out of the neck. The woman who is a seamstress that I've gone to for many years says to me that I'm one of her favorite people because I take tags out of my neck and then I create a hole and then I have to bring it in for her. So she loves me. I'm her annuity. All right. It's the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life. Jill on Money. That is the name of the program. I am Jill Schlesinger. He is Mark Talercio, and we are here to help you out. If you've got a financial question, ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Terrence writes, I'm 69 years old and retired. I'm not super rich, but my Fidelity contact suggests that I invest the bond portion of my IRA in their core bond strategy. It's a separately managed account. So this would be instead of keeping it in the Fidelity Bond Index Fund where it is now. I'm not familiar with separately managed accounts. What are the positives and negatives to consider here? Here's the big negative. It probably costs more. And probably, if you're not super rich and there's no reason to do this, I can't imagine the real upside. The upside might be that they say, oh, we can get better returns for you. I'd skip it. Okay. Amanda writes, what do you think of investing with worthy bonds as an alternative to a basic savings account or CD? I have an emergency fund. This is extra beyond that emergency fund money. At 5% interest, worthy bonds beats the current basic savings account and CD rates. Added bonus, the money's still very liquid. Website says no fees for early withdrawal. Okay, Amanda, I mean, it may be fine. It's just that they're bonds, and it's probably short-term bonds. So what is the downside would be you're going to be taking more risk. And if you're okay with that, that's fine. If you don't want that kind of risk, then the way to proceed would be to say, okay, let me just find higher yielding CDs. And you do that by going a longer term. in terms of instead of going for a 1-year CD, you might go a 5, a 6, a 7-year CD. And you can go to depositaccounts.com or Bankrate to try to find the best option for you. Nancy writes that my husband and I just retired. We're 67 and 68. We only make about $35,000 a year with Social Security. We live cheaply. We have $500 left over at the end of each month. We want to put it somewhere besides a savings account. Here we are talking about this again. Our mortgage payment is $180 a month. No car loans, no more student loans. Hope you can advise. I wonder if so you say you want somewhere besides a savings account. Well, I don't know. Like, what else do you have? What else do you have other investments? You can just add it to an investment account. Even though I'm usually not a fan of doing this, maybe paying down your mortgage could work, because if you don't want a ton of risk, but you want a higher return, if you're paying off a 4% note, that's one way to get a higher return without the risk. I need more information. I am so sorry to be vague, but there's a lot of questions that I have based on this. Okay? Okay. Here's one from Tish, who is following up about an interview we did with an organization called Facet Wealth. Did we put that out on here yet or not? Okay, we'll make sure that we put that out. So there's a new company. It's called Facet Wealth. It sort of sits somewhere between the robo-advisor and the full-blown advisor, full-service advisor. And so here's how it works. They charge a flat fee, somewhere around, let's call it $40 a month, $500 a year to up to $5,000 a year. And the model is that you pay for that flat fee, you use that flat fee, and they do real financial planning. And so in this case, Tish says, I'm considering signing up. I just don't know if paying the monthly amount is the best use of our funds right now, or better off going it alone or going to a fee-only hourly advisor. What are some factors we should consider before making a decision? Well, I'd want to know more about how much money you have in general. And number two, I'd want to know what are the financial issues that you're facing, because it may be fine to go alone right now. It may be that you don't have a very confusing life, that you could essentially keep doing what you're doing and not have any sort of real fundamental financial planning questions that need to be answered. So again, when you guys hear me talk and respond to these questions, so often I'm saying I need more information. It's why I'd love for you guys to be callers, because then I can ask you more. It's not just that I'm a nudge. It's not just that I'm nosy. It does help answer a lot of your questions. Okay? So follow up with us. We'll get back to you, we promise. And if you are writing for the first time, if you're sending us an email, ask Jill at jillonmoney.com, or if you're on the website, jillonmoney.com, and you click contact, but the contact button, flesh it out. Give us a lot. More is better, okay? Promise. Okay, Jill on Money. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money. If you have a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. There's a couple of ways to get in touch. If you're on our website, if you're on jillonmoney.com because you're buying dozens and dozens of copies of my new book, which is now out in paperback, The Dumb Things Smart People Do With Their Money. Maybe you done purchasing that book and you just click on the contact button, upper right-hand corner of the website. Very easy to do. Or you can just go old school, send an email, ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. That's what Robert did. He says he's listened to the podcast for a number of years, and he recently bought the book. Woo, woo. Podcast, by the way, is also called Jill on Money. Okay. I'm interested in your view on target date retirement funds. I'm currently invested in them through my company's 401k. I think I have a better than layman's knowledge of investments. I've worked as an actuary for over 20 years. Holy smokes. But he also writes, I don't trust myself to make my own investment choices, hence my use of target date funds. I'm currently investing in them through my employer's 401k at Vanguard. The expense ratio, cheap, 0.09%. I turned 55 about a month ago. I'm currently planning to work full-time until at least age 70. I'm invested in the Vanguard 2035 Target Date Fund. It's my only fund. I don't have any taxable investments. Thanks for any feedback. I think this is a great idea because essentially you're saying, I don't trust myself. I want to do that. I will say the only piece of the target date fund universe that might spook you is to understand that there's risk in that investment. I think, given that you're 55, if you looked at that 2035 fund, you might be surprised to learn that it's, more tilted towards the stock market than you feel comfortable with. But, it may not be. I think it's about 70-30 right now in stocks versus bonds. I'm not 100%. Maybe it's 65-35. But that's the only downside that I would say. It's cheap. Other target date funds, ones that are not through Vanguard, can be a lot more expensive. So you don't have to worry about that. Okay, we've got a whole nother hour. We are broadcasting live from the Capital One studios. Capital One, what's in your wallet? When we return, we're going to get back to more of your questions. And of course, if there's anything on your mind, go right now. Just go to the website, JillOnMoney.com. Contact button, upper right-hand corner. Do it. You know you want to. We'll be right back.
It's the weekend, and that can only mean one thing. You're listening to Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
You're back with Jill on Money. This is the show that takes the mystery out of your financial life. We are broadcasting live from the Capital One studios. My studio is freezing. What about you, Mark? I see you wearing a sweater. I'm sleeveless. Dang it. That was dumb. This is a program that not only takes the mystery out of your financial life, but also introduces you to some interesting characters, also known as guests. Today, we have the chairman of Dunkin Brands, which I think is now DD, right? It's just, I don't even know if it's called Dunkin. It's just called Dunkin. Nigel Travis is his name. He has a really cool background, actually. He's worked at Blockbuster. He ran that. He actually was sort of came into the industry as through the HR track. But he is the chairman of Dunkin Brands. He was the company's chief executive officer for almost 10 years until the end of last year. And he's just cool. He's wrote this book that I found interesting. It's called The Challenge Culture. So here's our interview with Nigel Travis. What is the best career or financial decision that you've ever made?
Wow, that's a tough one.
That's an icebreaker, man.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably doing something. I've done many things in my life I never wanted to do, expected to do, and I think the first one was, and it's mentioned in the book, when my boss at Burger King, Barry Gibbons, said, "You're so involved in the business, you need to run something." I pushed back, obviously, and said, no, I want to be the best HR person one can ever be. And as a result, he said, no, you're too involved in the business, too interested in the details, go and run something. So I went and ran something, and that was a great decision.
And that's a really good piece of advice. I think that you may be among a very small cohort of HR professionals who move into the C-suite. Is that wrong of me to presume that?
Yeah, as Mary, I've forgotten her second name at General Motors. Barra. Spent some time in HR. And there are two or three others that I've found. But I actually think it's a great introduction to business because business at the end of the day is all about people. I also recently bumped into a McDonald's franchisee, and I asked this person the question, how much time do you spend on people? Because people's a big challenge. And he said 90%. And I think most people don't spend anywhere near that.
I think it's interesting because if you look at the world and relationships and people, you have to feel like the leader understands you, hears you, yet so much of the large corporate universe is around these numbers and the metrics. And it seems to be a real divisiveness in the world, because if I'm holding your feet to the fire based on the numbers, but yet I don't know who the heck you are, you don't think I have anything else at stake here except the numbers, you don't care about me as a human being, then I'm not going to be as good a worker. So talk a little bit about how you developed this concept of the challenge culture.
Well, yeah, I mean, as I said before, I started in human resources. In fact, I started in labor relations. And one of the benefits of starting in labor relations, called industrial relations in the UK, is you see what happens when things break down, because you have conflict in those days between management and unions. But I learnt the bad results that can come. So I spent the first 20 years in human resources, and I learnt that culture was very important. And the point I keep making about the book is everyone focuses on the challenge, but not the culture bit. And there's two words there. And I think in many ways, the culture is the more important word. And then when I was at Grand Metropolitan, which was a big British conglomerate that owned all kinds of companies from Alpo to Pearl Vision to, in the UK, bars, restaurants, breweries, betting stores, you name it. So we had a lot of companies. When I was there, I got promoted eventually to be the Group Management Development Director, and I worked with the then Chairman and CEO, Alan Shepard, and he had a style that was relatively aggressive but with a good sense of humour, and it was actually described as the light grip on the throat in newspaper articles. And he said, let's sit down and talk about how we want to run this organisation. We sat down, we had several sessions, and we talked about things like being action-oriented and focused on people. But the one that described that light grip on the throat, I came up with the term the challenge culture. And I said, this is a much more better way of describing it. So that's when that first came on the scene. I never really thought any more about it until I was at Blockbuster, where despite what most people think, which is we completely dropped the ball, we didn't. We missed a few things because we were being tackled by technology all the time. We were owned by Viacom, which before we started, I said overall was a great experience for me. And we had people like Sumner Redstone clearly very involved in the business. But we probably missed how big Netflix was going to be. We definitely did miss that. And we eventually tried to catch up. So the whole challenge culture concept got reinforced there, where I said to myself, if you don't constantly challenge the status quo or challenge what you're doing every day, you're not doing the right thing. So it evolved from there. And then when I became a CEO, I implemented it. And essentially the book tells all that story.
The obstacle that I see in a lot of organizations is the CEO gets up and starts talking about culture, but then 2, 3, 4 levels down, that culture is not being permeated throughout the organization. So how do you do that?
Okay, so great question. I think you have to demonstrate it in everything you do. And you're right that a lot of people will sit there and say, okay, let's agree on our culture, have a big discussion, and then nothing happens. So the first thing is I'm vigorous on following up on everything. I mean, I'm probably one of the most aggressive follow-uppers there is. And you don't have to be nasty with it. You can just say, any progress on this? But I think you have to model it down the organizations. And an example I describe in quite a lot of detail in the book is what I call the coffee chat, which is actually something that I started at Blockbuster, took it through Papa John's, and then used it at Dunkin. Effectively, what it is taking people lower down the organization, usually below director level, doing a diagonal slice of functions, 20 people in the room, and we basically say, okay, we're going to have the equivalent of a TV talk show. We're going to talk about subjects. You can talk about anything you want. You can talk about Dunkin' Donuts. You can talk about Baskin Robbins. You can talk about sales. You can talk about acquisitions. You can talk about the rumors about us being acquired. So I deliberately at the start open it up so there are no taboo subjects. I've even had meetings where I said, okay, I want to talk about the Me Too movement because it's important that you tell people there's no barriers. We then have a discussion. It isn't a Q&A of Nigel. Sometimes people try and make it, but the first thing I do is, I think that's a wonderful question. I have a view, but what do you think about that?
So you don't want to put your voice into this before you hear from the person who you're speaking
Yeah, that's
with,
a good
right?
way. That's a better way than I could describe it.
You know, it's funny because what I love also that when you say here, I facilitate the discussion, I don't dominate it. I think that that's a really hard thing for strong-willed professionals to learn, that in order to get somebody to open up to you, you got to give them space. And if you don't give them space, why are they opening up in the first place?
Good point. I think that's where my HR background really helps because in HR, if you do the job properly, you should be doing a lot of listening.
We'll get back to our interview with Nigel Travis in just a minute. During the break, you may want to just send us an email, some financial question on your mind. We're here for you. The email address, askjill@jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
Back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger helps you take the mystery out of your finances.
You're back with Jill on Money. And we are in the midst of an interview with Nigel Travis, the author of The Challenge Culture, Why the Most Successful Organizations Run on Pushback. He is the chairman of Dunkin Brands. And so, you know, what's interesting about that is the title always caught me. I thought that was sort of an interesting way to bring in this idea that how do you get your people, your staff, your coworkers, how do you get people talking? How do you get them to feel comfortable enough to push back? Because that's tough. I'm sorry, in this environment where everyone's sort of clawing and trying to figure out how they're going to get to the next spot, sometimes you don't want to put yourself out there. So Travis has an incredibly effective way to get people talking. And building on the fact that, it is partially a coffee company, Dunkin Brands, also some ice cream, he has something called a coffee chat, where he wants to engage people and get them to talk about real stuff. And he doesn't put any limitations on it. But it is interesting what he finds out. And it's also interesting to give people that presence, to give them that ability to articulate what's on their minds is really effective. So here is more of our interview with Nigel Travis. In those two-way conversations, in those coffee chats, you also make sure that things are civil. You don't, because you basically in the beginning of the book say that the discourse should be civil. Mm-hmm. And that seems like, first of all, so British, and I love that. I mean, not in your Houses of Parliament, which seems very non-civil.
Uncivil yes.
Indeed. I wonder how you manage that in an age where civility seems to be going a bit down the drain.
Civility is reinforced if you show that you're vulnerable and you're willing to expose yourself. And I think it's something I kind of do naturally now. I will say to someone now, I believe we should do this or that. And the next question I seem to say automatically is, what do you think of that? And I think civility is so important. I'm appalled with some of the stuff I see. I mean, you sit and watch, it doesn't matter which channel, Fox News, CNN, they're all shouting at each other. So in the coffee chats, it is a very civil conversation, and you actually hear what people are saying. Isn't that kind of radical to actually hear what people are saying?
It's interesting because you also said that you are willing to engage on tough topics. And it's fascinating to hear people say, well, off the record, here's what I think. But they don't trust the organization or the higher ups because they feel like nothing's going to change. Why would I put myself out there? It sounds to me like your willingness to hear someone's worries, complaints, anxieties could raise some tough issues. So in that experience, did you ever have to tackle something that you were surprised by, had to act on? Did anything get raised up for you that you said, oh, my God, I didn't know that. I have to do something?
We did have someone who, after a coffee chat, said, could I have a chat with you? They didn't want to put it out publicly. And the issue wasn't big, but the person just wanted to raise it. We also had a few cultural issues in some other countries because sometimes the American culture doesn't match the local one. And we delved into it, worked it out, and it was a very nice accommodation because, other countries look at it very differently from America. Sometimes you just have to get all the facts on the table, recognize that our culture here in America, and despite the fact I sound very British, but that may be a different cultural approach from what happens, say, in Italy or the Middle East or somewhere else.
So when you have these conversations, how do you filter it back to your management team? How do you do that?
Well, that's important. And what I do is I actually have an independent person who is young from corporate communications who takes the notes. I don't take the notes. She writes the notes. And we don't say that Jill said this or Fred said that. It's this point went on and the group discussed this point. And the group's view was, now, it's not necessarily a statistically valid sample because some of the group may have been quiet. And then what I do is I send the notes to our leadership team. And then if it's something that's really critical, I'll go back to my follow-up. I'll follow up and say, what are we doing about this?
How important do you think in your leadership the role of speaking out in the public square about things going on? You got into a bit of hot water talking about immigration. And I'm wondering how you feel that corporate America's responsibility towards speaking out when you see something you disagree with. It used to be 100 years ago when companies were kind of muddling along and doing their business. No one wanted to take a stand. How do you view that responsibility as a C-suite executive?
Well, it's fascinating because I think I got nailed twice in 1 year. One was on immigration, as you point out, and that's in the book. Another one was about minimum wage. This country has a remarkably open government. I mean, I don't think there's anywhere else in the world that you can go down to Washington and meet people who are truly important and talk to them in a very open and candid manner. So I think this country doesn't get the credit it deserves for that. And it doesn't really matter which administration. I've been down there in the Obama administration and talked to very important people. In this administration, I've had excellent dialogues with people like Secretary Acosta, the Labor Secretary, the Small Business Administrator, Linda McMahon, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's very open. I think where some CEOs go wrong is they say but don't do. I think you have to go down. You have to talk to people in Washington, or it could be Sacramento if it's California, or you could go down to the State House in Boston. You have to go and see people, talk about it. It's no good just going in on the radio or the TV and saying this is what needs to happen. You need to explain your point of view. I think in many ways it goes back to civility. I think CEOs do have to stand and give their views. I think government needs to hear it. But the key thing is government, whatever government is. It could be the EU, it could be the White House, it could be a state senate or the governor or whatever. You need to say it to them face to face so that they clearly understand your point. And I think a good example of that is, we have franchisees. We represent franchisees. I've got 2,000 globally. And when the whole tax reform bill was going through, we made the point about pass-through taxation, and the end result was I think we made a difference by making our point. But it was only by constantly going there and talking. And again, I reinforce, I found both parties to be amazingly receptive to talking to people.
I have to just pivot a little bit here because you have a section on napping, which I thought was the most wonderful thing for someone who wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, you do, do you?
Yes. There we go. We're high-fiving. It's exhausting to have 2 o'clock roll around for me. So talk about your napping habits.
Well, yeah, I mean, I tend not to sleep too long. I like to go to bed at 10.
10, that's already an hour past my bedtime.
Well, okay.
There you go.
So I go to bed at, say, 10. I tend to read the Times in London, so I get tomorrow's news today. And then I tend to wake up 4 or 5, something like that. And then if you work really hard, by about 2, you feel tired.
Exhausted.
So I have a nap. I've done it in the office. I do it at home. When I travel, and I've always traveled a lot, I mean, last few years, and it'll probably drop a bit now, I've done 140 flights a year. I can sometimes nap 3 or 4 times a day for a quick burst of 10 minutes.
Here's why you have to nap, everyone. Napping increases your alertness. Napping improves your accuracy. Napping helps you make better decisions. Napping fattens your bottom line. Napping boosts your creativity. Okay, we'll get back to our interview in just a second. Meanwhile, while you're on break, go to JillOnMoney.com, and there you can subscribe to our podcast. It's called Jill on Money. Isn't that cool? Jill on Money podcast, available. A little different than the show. Check it out. Okay, we'll be right back.
Do I invest here? Should I put my money there? Jill Schlesinger can help you. Back to Jill on Money.
You're back with Jill on Money. I am Jill Schlesinger. So happy to be chatting with you. All right. So this is the moment where we do the shameless plugging. My new book is coming out. You can order it right now. It is called The Dumb Things Smart People Do with Their Money. And if some of you recognize yourselves in some of the stories I tell, that's because I was able to use a lot of the calls that we've received from you, a lot of the emails. Yes, of course, we changed names, but we really wanted to get a representative grouping of the questions that we receive all the time. And then what I did was try to say, here are the common mistakes that many people fall prey to. And the other cool thing is that we are able to tap into some of our previous guests. And when you read the book, you'll see that there is Mitu Storoni, who is the neuro-ophthalmologist who just was amazing. You'll see that Annie Duke is mentioned. You'll see that I think Jason Zweig is mentioned, some of these past guests. And so when you go and buy the book, and you just do that by going to JillOnMoney.com, click on the link for the book. Actually, it's right on the front door. Mark popped it right on the front door of the site. So JillOnMoney.com, you'll scroll to the bottom. You can see all the info about the book. I thought last year, one of my favorite shows of all of last year was the Annie Duke show, because she wrote this book called Thinking in Bets. She's a professional poker player, and just so many of the things that she talked about, some of the emotional traps that we fall into, were incredibly useful. So, you know, I'm pretty sure because you listen to this show, you are kind of in the mode of let me take control of my financial life. This is one way to do so. The dumb things smart people do with their money. Okay, now, enough of my yakking. Let me get back to our interview with Nigel Travis of Dunkin Brands.
Well, here's another example. It's not napping. Sometimes I'm in a meeting, and say it's an intense meeting, and let's make up a subject. We're in a meeting talking about Indonesia, just to pick a country, right? And it's an intense meeting trying to figure out what to do. I will deliberately go the 70 yards from my office to the bathroom and then come back. I will think of something that's completely different just by that sheer detachment from the problem. And one of the things that I talk about somewhere in the book, I think, is hovering above a problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's a form of hovering. You take yourself out of the immediate challenges and you give yourself a perspective, and that allows you to look outside to in.
Are there environments where the questioning is hard? For example, you know, whatever, I'm a voyeur. I love asking questions. I'm interested. You can tell already, right? But there are a lot of people who feel shyness. Mm-hmm. How do you get a shy introvert to feel comfortable with the questioning culture?
Well, good question. And I find sometimes it's about your own exposure. I talk in the book about a psychological tool that's been around forever, and it's very simple, called the Johari window. And there's basically two axes on the way they measure people's arena. One is feedback and one's exposure. And I think you need to expose yourself, which, by the way, doesn't mean taking any clothes off. It means showing you're a little bit vulnerable. I mean, you may tell a story about how you screwed up at work today, and then you perhaps can go in through your weakness to them, and people then laugh about it. It makes them more relaxed. So I think I'm fortunate. I'm British. Self-deprecation is something that we're quite good at in Britain.
All right, let me do a quick. You should go. We'll have a link to the book, The Challenge Culture: Why the Most Successful Organizations Run on Pushback, and there's also a great checklist at the end for creating a challenging culture, which I think is awesome. But before we let you go, I've got a lightning round of questions that I wrote down before.
This is always frightening.
I know, right? What's your favorite fast food?
Whoa, that's a tough one. Well, I have to say, going back in my time, I think besides all our Dunkin products, I'd say the Whopper.
The Whopper. Okay. What's your favorite fast food that is British only?
It's a great concept in Britain called Leon.
Okay.
Which is fresh, healthy fast food.
Okay. Very good, Mark says. Okay. My favorite fast food in the UK, I don't even think it exists anymore. Spud You Like.
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't it? Jackets?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you should say that because I went somewhere the other day and they had the Spuds, and I was thinking, wow, I don't see many of those now.
That's right. Spud You Like. Fantastic.
Every pub used to have them.
It's amazing. Okay, let's get into that. Favorite British ale?
I'm not really a beer drinker.
What are you? What's your beer of choice? What's your drink of choice?
Red wine. And
what an
hold on,
snob! I love that.
And bourbon.
Okay, favorite bourbon.
Woodford Reserve. I used to live in Louisville.
Really? I'm very partial to the Widow Jane. I like that, and I also like. I just had a new one. I had to think about the name of that. I'll get back to you.
Here's a great idea for a party. I've done it.
Yeah.
You get like 12 bourbons.
Yeah.
Invite people around. It's a great way to get the party going.
Favorite Baskin Robbins flavor?
Oh, I'm incredibly boring.
Don't say vanilla.
I am.
Jeez Louise, he's so British. My favorite, Jamocha almond fudge. Always a classic. Favorite Dunkin' donut?
Boring again. Glazed.
Oh, my God.
I know.
Unbelievable.
I need to change.
You really do. You were also the CEO of Papa John's. Best slice of pizza in New York City. Do you know? Do you have one?
No, but I'll tell you the best pizza at Papa John's is barbecue chicken.
That is disgusting.
I clearly need to think more. I need to challenge my food choices more.
Don't you think? Okay. Last but not least, before you leave, we started the program. I said, what was your best career or financial decision? And you said getting this advice to leave HR and go run a business. What about your worst?
Well, probably I have to go back to the Blockbuster example where we could have bought Netflix for $50 million.
Stop it.
Viacom said, why don't you go out and buy it? And we said, no, it's a fad. And, you know, whatever day you look at it, Reed Hastings, who's done an unbelievable job there, I think it's now worth $160 billion. So I'm not sure it was a vice, but I am accountable along with some others for that decision.
I would say that every major media company had that same opportunity and passed. Well, thanks so much to Nigel Travis. It was really great to meet him. The book is called The Challenge Culture. You should check it out. It's Jill on Money, and when we return, we're going to start talking about your financial questions. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. That's what Kathleen did, who says she enjoys watching me on CBS This Morning and all the different topics that we present. And she says, in a clear and understandable way. Bottom line, we're fans. I love that. Thank you so much. It means so much to me. Okay, Kathleen says, I hope you can help me with an issue that I've been grappling with since we retired in May of 2018. My wife and I are 65, and we are now on Medicare. We'll start Social Security this year. We were not aware of the additional costs associated with Medicare based on income levels, and we're trying to decide the best way to address this issue. It's called IRMA, IRMAA. It is the surcharge that's based on whatever your tax liability is. And it can actually add up to real money, okay? So this is something to consider. A lot of people don't talk about this. These are income-related monthly adjustments, a surcharge. It's known as IRMA. And so it can apply to Medicare Part B, and also to D, the prescription drug plan. And it can add up for real, okay? So, most people don't have to deal with this, but there are some high-income retirees who have to pay anywhere from, say, $13 a month to like $75 a month. So it can be for real. Okay, now, here's going back to the actual question at hand. This is kind of how to manage the cash flow. That's really what the issue comes down to. While my wife and I were working, we maxed out our 401k contributions each year. Our salaries were too high to contribute to a Roth, and when the law changed to offer the Roth as an option, we could not convert our 401k to the Roth because of the high tax burden. Okay, now here's the deal. They got $2 million in 401ks, and that means their annual income, $168,000, and it includes a $70,000 transfer from our 401k to a Roth account. All that, pension, interest, capital. Okay, $168,000 is just under the Medicare IRMA threshold. My question, what's the best option with moving money from our IRA accounts to a Roth? Should we increase our income level to a 4 or 5 off the grid and pay the taxes? Should we stay in this? I think what you want to do is, I get that you wanted to stay in the 22% bracket, which is why you kept it under 168. I'd go ahead and pay it at the 24% bracket. I would be, because the 24% is not that much more, and it goes all the way up to over $320,000. So that's what I would think about. I think that's probably smarter. Now, so there are more questions here. So yes, I think you can kind of pop up a tax bracket. Or the other choice is stay level, and you'd avoid paying IRMA for the rest of their lives. But I think that I think you're probably better off converting. And, doesn't have to be all at once, but I mean, I think that you would probably want to go to a place where you get as much of that money converted, not just for the IRMA, but also to lock in that tax liability, because it's just going to be more and more money that you're going to have to take out. So I think that's where I fall down on it. For those of you who don't understand what we're talking about, when you make more money, it is true that it has unintended consequences. When you make more money, it has unintended consequences as you actually start to collect different benefits. So I think you got to consider this. A lot of people just kind of blow it off. Okay, here's someone who's asking about the Equifax data breach. I wrote about it a long time ago, and this is Gloria says that she tried to retrieve a credit report through annualcreditreport.com. I was told it could not be done, and I would need to mail in proof of identity. Huh? Annualcreditreport.com. That is the right site. I would not pay for that. Do not pay for it. The Gloria says that we're older, 75 and 82. We've got no need for credit, so being frozen works for us, though I do see that our credit score is dropping from lack of data. If you're frozen, then I wouldn't worry about this. I really wouldn't. I presume that annualcreditreport.com, I don't recall that you have to send anything in. You may have just by mistake gone to the wrong site, but be that as it may, with your credit frozen and the fact that you don't need credit, the most important thing you can do, monitor your accounts, keep an eye and see if there's credit card accounts and those bank accounts are safe and sound, and don't worry too much. Okay? Mark, what do I got here? All right, let me do this fast. Chris says, I got your book for Christmas. I'm enjoying reading it. My husband and I are financially secure. We're looking for advice on what age to start Social Security, required minimum distributions, converting 401s to Roth. We're a little too heavy in 401k. Investment advisor says talk to our accountant. He doesn't think he is the best person to advise us. Oh, is that the case? You may want a new advisor. And if that's the case, I'd go to letsmakeaplan.org or go to napfa.org, napfa.org. If this is something a financial advisor who's a fiduciary should know how to do. Okay? You're listening to Jill on Money, and when we get back, we are talking to you. More of your questions. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money. Before we close out the show, I want to remind you that we are broadcasting live from the Policy Genius studios. Policy Genius, it's the easy way to compare and buy insurance. Just go to policygenius.com. Do that. Okay, Sharon writes that she says, we own over 12,000 shares of AT&T stock. What's AT&T selling at these days? I haven't looked at that. AT&T stock, let's see, having 38 bucks a share. That's a lot of money in one. 12,000 shares. That seems like a lot, Mark. What do you think? It's almost $500,000. Zowie. All right, here we go. I can understand the concern because now you've got a ton of money in stock, in one stock. And so Lawrence says, we're concerned to read an article describing Paul Singer's Elliott Management Hedge Fund's action in buying up AT&T stock. The strategy has generally been detrimental to the company in which he invests. Should we continue with the dividend reinvestment in this company, consider other options? Okay, I don't know about anything else you got going on. So it's very difficult for me to make any sort of smart recommendation. That said, you got a lot of money in one stock. So at the very least, I would say I'd back off on putting any more money and I would not do dividend reinvestment. But are there other assets that you hold? Is there something else going on? That's kind of what I'm interested in. Without that information, it's very difficult for us to even give you any sort of good and smart advice. Okay? All right, that's it. That's the show. I can't believe it went by so quickly. Unbelievable. All right. If you've got a financial question throughout the week, we're always here for you. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. And the website is always being updated. Just go to jillonmoney.com. We've got resources. We got the book. We got the weekly newsletter, which is free. All of that. Just go to jillonmoney.com. And we'll see you next week.